Welcome to my channel. Today's story is about a caring husband turned his house into a paid reality show, selling his wife's every move to strangers. But before you watch, please let me know where you're from and how much time you have. I'm genuinely curious. Enjoy the video.
I walked into the house a little after 11. Everything was the way it always was. Quiet, the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the hallway light left on for me. I kicked off my heels, walked to the bedroom where Mark was already asleep, turned toward the wall, and finally let myself exhale. That familiar, comfortable exhaustion after a good night out. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea, sat down at the kitchen table, and opened my laptop to scroll through social media before bed. And then I noticed, out of the corner of my eye, that the browser was open to a tab that wasn't mine. Mark had been using the computer while I was out. He did that sometimes, forgot to close his pages. But usually it was news, work stuff, occasionally something about fishing gear on eBay. This time, I saw a tab with a name that looked like a technical glitch at first, something like IP Cam Viewer, followed by a long string of numbers. I was about to close it when something in the image caught my eye. It was small, in the corner of the screen, like a video preview that hadn't fully loaded. But I could make out light-colored walls, a wooden countertop, the dark rectangle of a television mounted on the wall. My kitchen. I was looking at my own kitchen through the lens of a camera mounted in the corner near the ceiling, directly across from the refrigerator. In the corner of the screen, white lettering showed the time, the current time. I was sitting at my table, holding my cup of tea, watching myself from the outside, the empty chair I'd just been sitting in. And clicking on that video or closing the tab was the most terrifying choice of my life, because I still didn't know how many cameras were recording me, how long this had been going on, or who besides my husband had access. But the first thought that came to my mind wasn't even that. I thought, I wonder if he watched me leave, watched me fix my dress in the hallway mirror, watched me open the door. And then I looked at the dark corner of the kitchen, toward where the camera was aimed. And I felt like I was looking at myself from the future, from some parallel world where my life was just content that my husband consumed while sitting on the living room couch, as I drank my chamomile tea in the kitchen, feeling completely safe. But I'm getting ahead of myself.
It started out so differently, though maybe the first warning signs came long before that night. I just didn't know how to hear them. Mark and I got married when I was 23 and he was 27. We met at a coffee shop near the university. I was looking for my keys. He walked over and said he'd been watching me circle the parking lot for 15 minutes, and if I didn't get a grip, I'd be late for class. Funny, confident, with dark eyes and a slight smirk that said, "I know more about the world than you do, but I'm willing to stoop to your level." That got me. I was quiet, bookish, all about my studies, and he seemed like an adult, complicated, someone with experience I didn't have. 3 months later, we started dating. A year after that, he proposed. No fanfare, just held out a ring box while we were sitting on the pier eating ice cream. "So," he said, "should we go to City Hall before I change my mind?" And I laughed because it was so Mark, cynical, sideways, like he didn't care, when really his hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the box. The first few years were almost perfect. We rented a one-bedroom apartment in the suburbs. I worked as a paralegal at a small firm. Mark did something he called investment consulting, though for the longest time, I couldn't figure out what that actually meant. He worked from home a lot, went to meetings, talked on the phone in strange coded phrases, but I chalked it up to the nature of his business. I chalked a lot of things up. I thought being a good wife meant trusting, not prying into my husband's affairs, not asking too many questions. My mother always said, the man is the head of the family, but the woman is the neck. Where the neck turns, the head follows. I was a neck that made a point of looking wherever the head was looking, even when I started to feel like maybe where we were going wasn't quite right. Our apartment was small, but Mark loved gadgets. He was always buying things: smart speakers, motion sensors, voice-activated light bulbs, security cameras for the front door. It's for safety, he'd explain, installing yet another device. The world isn't as friendly as you think. I laughed at his paranoia, but I went along with it because his concern felt like, I don't know, attentiveness. A man who thinks about his family's safety, what's wrong with that? The first camera appeared in the hallway, a small, round thing that looked like a peephole. Mark said it was a video doorbell, so we could see who'd come by when we weren't home. The second one was in the kitchen, above the refrigerator. "What's that for?" I asked. "So I can see if you left the stove on when we're away," he answered without even turning around. I felt stupid for asking. Of course, concern, safety. Then a camera appeared in the living room, then in the hallway leading to the bedroom. I found the last one by accident when I was looking for a blanket in the closet. It was built into the bookshelf right among the books, its lens aimed at the bed. I froze, feeling something unpleasant tighten in my chest, but I immediately told myself to calm down. "Mark, why is there a camera in the bedroom?" I asked at dinner, trying to keep my voice even. He put down his fork, looked at me with a hint of irritation, like a child asking an awkward question in front of company. "Laura, don't be ridiculous. It's part of the security system, motion sensor. If someone breaks in while we're sleeping, the system will trigger." "But that's not a motion sensor, that's a camera." "It's both. They're integrated. I'm tired of explaining this. If it bothers you that much, I'll take it down." And he made a move to get up from the table to go take it down right then and there. I caught his arm. "No, I was just asking. Sorry." He sat back down, shrugged, and went back to eating. And I felt small, stupid, ungrateful. My husband works hard, provides for us, installs a security system, and she has the nerve to notice a camera in the bedroom? I told myself I was being paranoid. I just have one of those personalities. I dramatize everything. I mean, if he had bad intentions, he wouldn't put the cameras out in the open like that, wouldn't explain what they were for. He always explained. Every camera, every sensor, every new app he installed in my phone so I could, as he put it, control the house remotely. I don't even remember the last time he asked before picking up my phone. He'd just say, "Give it here, I need to update the firmware," or "Let me sync this with the smart speaker," or "Let me check why your battery's draining so fast." And I'd hand it over, because he knew about technology and I didn't, because it was an act of caring, because he was my husband. Now I understand that was the first layer, the thinnest, most harmless one, which I justified all on my own. But back then, in those early years, I was happy. We made plans, saved up for a bigger place, talked about kids, went on vacations. Mark knew how to make me feel safe. He knew what to say when I was tired from work, how to cheer me up when I was doubting myself. "You're so smart," he'd say, stroking my hair. "But you need someone to guide you. You're too soft. Someone will take advantage of you, sell you for parts." I laughed. I liked that he guided me. I liked feeling small and protected, even if sometimes his concern felt excessive. Sometimes, when he was in his office too long, and I could hear his low, tense voice through the wall, I'd wonder what he was doing, why he had so many secrets. But he always had an explanation. A new client, a complicated contract, confidential information he wasn't allowed to share, even with his wife. "You're a paralegal," he'd say. "You understand client confidentiality." And I'd nod. I understood. I understood so well that I stopped asking questions, even of myself. We moved into a 2-bedroom apartment downtown after 5 years of marriage. It felt like a huge victory. Our savings, plus, Mark said, a lucky investment that had paid off. I didn't ask for details. I was just happy about the new kitchen with its wooden countertops, the light-colored walls, the big bedroom that had room for not just the bed, but the vanity I'd always wanted. The cameras came with us. Mark installed them the first day, while I was unpacking boxes. I heard him drilling into the walls, setting things up on his phone, and at some point I thought, how many cameras do we have now? I walked into the hallway, counted 3. Then I found a 4th in the kitchen. Then I saw a 5th in the living room, disguised as a picture frame. There was no camera in the bedroom, and I breathed a sigh of relief. After that conversation, he'd apparently decided it was unnecessary. I didn't know then that there was a camera in the bedroom.
It just wasn't out in the open. It was hidden, and I wouldn't find it for another 2 years when I happened to be changing the battery in the wall clock Mark had hung across from the bed. But that was still a long way off. First came the warning signs, which I learned to ignore the way you learn to ignore the hum of the refrigerator. At first it bothers you, then you stop hearing it. Then it becomes part of the silence, and when the refrigerator suddenly shuts off, the silence is deafening. The first sign came when I happened to glance at the browser history on our shared laptop. I was looking for a recipe. Mark had asked me to make something special for his business partners who were coming over, and I'd opened the browser to search for something with duck. In the search history, I saw a query that had nothing to do with duck. How to choose hidden surveillance camera. I froze, staring at the screen. My head filled with noise, like standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down. But immediately, I found an explanation. He was probably picking out a camera for the front door, or for the cabin we were thinking about buying. Or maybe it wasn't even him. Maybe the browser had saved some ad link. I closed the tab and tried to forget about it until dinner. Over dinner, I asked, "Mark, have you thought about putting a camera in the hallway? The neighbors are always making a mess. I heard someone suggested building-wide security." He looked at me carefully, squinting slightly, and answered too quickly. "I've thought about it. Not necessary right now. Our locks are fine." I nodded. He didn't say, "No, I was looking at cameras for the hallway." He didn't say anything that confirmed my theory. But I hadn't given him the chance. I hadn't asked directly. I'd asked about the hallway, and he answered about the hallway. I told myself, "See, you're overthinking. He doesn't have any secrets. He just cares about security." But somewhere deep in my stomach, a cold knot remained, one I worked hard to ignore. The second sign was my phone. Mark was always curious about what I was looking at, who I was texting. At first, it seemed like harmless curiosity. "Who's that? What photo did you like? What are you and your friends talking about?" I'd show him because I had nothing to hide. My texts with my friend Elena were about recipes, TV shows, complaints about work. With my mom, plans for the weekend and questions about her health. With coworkers, work stuff. But over time, his questions got more insistent. He'd pick up my phone when I was in the shower, and when I came back, I'd notice the apps were rearranged, settings changed. "I just updated the system," he'd say without looking at me, "and deleted some apps you don't use. They were slowing down your phone." I'd open my phone and see that the messaging apps I rarely used were gone, but there was a new location sharing app, Family Locator, he called it. "So I always know where you are in case something happens," he explained. "The world is dangerous, Laura, and you're so careless." I didn't think much of it at the time. So what? An app. Let him know where I am. I have nothing to hide. But then I noticed he'd check where I'd been when I came home. "Why did you stop at the mall?" he'd ask, as if it were just casual conversation. "I saw you were there for 2 hours. Buy anything?" And in his voice was not curiosity, but control. I'd start explaining, telling him what I bought, showing him receipts. And every time, afterward, I felt humiliated, but I couldn't figure out why. He's just concerned. He's just looking out for me. I'm not doing anything wrong, so why do I feel so ashamed?
The third sign was the loudest, but I turned that into silence too. It happened a year after we moved. We'd just gotten back from vacation. I was happy, tan, full of plans. Mark went to take a shower and I started unpacking. In one of the side pockets of his backpack, I found the stiff, crinkly bag. I opened it. Inside were tiny devices like buttons, wires, some kind of chips, and one camera, tiny, the size of my thumbnail. I held it in my palm, looking at the little black eye of the lens. My fingers suddenly felt clumsy. The camera slipped, rolled across the floor, and stopped at the foot of the bed. I could hear the shower running, Mark humming to himself. I slowly bent down, picked up the camera, put it back in the bag, and shoved the bag back where I'd found it. I didn't say anything to him. I just sat on the edge of the bed, clutching his t-shirt, staring at nothing. Thoughts spun in my head, fast and sticky as spider webs. It's for work. He's testing equipment for a client. He's a consultant. Maybe they work with security systems. I don't understand any of this. Why am I even snooping? He'll be mad if he finds out I went through his things. He'll say I don't trust him, and I'm supposed to trust him. I stood up, put my sweater in the closet, and didn't let myself think about it again until that evening. And that evening, when we were lying in bed and he was holding me, I asked, Mark, have you ever thought about working in security, like surveillance systems, alarms? He grunted. Why the sudden interest? Just wondering. You know so much about it. Laura, I invest in different projects. Some of them are in security. It's just business. He kissed my forehead. Don't worry about it. Go to sleep. I closed my eyes. I didn't worry. I carefully cleared my mind of anything that might disturb our fragile, comfortable world. I wouldn't even admit to myself that I was afraid. Afraid of his questions, afraid of his control, afraid that if I started digging, I'd find something that would destroy everything we had. And we had so much that was good. He could be tender, caring, generous. He gave gifts, planned surprises, remembered every date. He said I was the meaning of his life, that he'd be lost without me. And I believed him. Because when someone says things like that, you want so badly to believe. That night, I found the feed wasn't anything special. I'd gone to Elena's birthday. She was turning 35, had a small group of close friends over. We sat on her deck, drinking wine, laughing, reminiscing about college. I got home around 11:30, tired but happy. Mark was asleep. I went to the kitchen, put the kettle on, opened my laptop, and I saw that tab. I sat there watching myself from the outside, the empty kitchen I'd just been sitting in, the chair where I'd left the imprint of my body, the cup I'd been drinking from. In the corner of the screen, white lettering showed the time, 11:47 p.m. I looked up at the real kitchen. The clock on the microwave said 11:48. The feed was live. I slowly raised my hand and waved it toward the camera above the refrigerator, which I'd always thought was just a smoke detector. On the laptop screen, my hand made the same movement a split second later. I watched myself watching myself, and I felt the world begin to unravel. I didn't know how many more cameras were in the apartment. I didn't know how long they'd been there. I didn't know who, besides Mark, had access to that site. I didn't know anything except this. My life, my home, my body, my conversations, my tears, my laughter, my moments of solitude when I thought no one was watching, all of it was someone else's content. I sat at the kitchen table, gripping the edge so hard my nails dug into the wood, watching the laptop screen where my empty kitchen waited for me to come back and resume being a spectacle. And then I heard footsteps. Mark had woken up. I heard the bedroom door creak, his footsteps shuffle down the hallway. I had maybe 30 seconds to decide, close the laptop and pretend I hadn't seen anything, or meet him here in the kitchen with that screen open and demand answers. I closed the laptop. I slammed the lid shut so fast I nearly caught my fingers and pushed it to the far edge of the table. My heart was pounding in my throat. My hands were shaking. I tucked them under my thighs so he wouldn't notice. "What are you doing up?" Mark asked, walking into the kitchen. He was wearing a t-shirt and sweatpants, hair disheveled, squinting against the light. "Wanted some tea," I said, and my voice came out steady, too steady. "Go back to bed. I'll be there soon." He came over, kissed the top of my head, grabbed a glass of water from the counter, and left. I sat there staring at the closed laptop. I needed to open it again. I needed to see that tab, copy the address, take a screenshot, figure out what was inside that site. But I was afraid that if I opened it, I'd see not just the kitchen, afraid I'd see the bedroom, the bathroom, my mornings when I thought I was alone, walking around in my bathrobe, singing, talking to myself, crying when no one could see. Afraid of seeing the person I was when I was sure no one was watching, because if I saw that, I could never pretend it hadn't happened, and I wanted so badly to pretend, so badly I was ready to smash the laptop, tear the camera out of the wall, go to sleep and tell myself in the morning, "You imagined it. You're just tired. It was a glitch. Mark was testing some equipment." But I couldn't, because the camera in the kitchen was watching me, and I knew that when I went to the bedroom, it would keep watching the empty chair, and the feed would go to the server, and someone somewhere might be watching me right now, sitting at my kitchen table with my arms wrapped around myself, trying not to cry.
I stayed in the kitchen until 3 in the morning. My tea had gone cold long ago. I kept reheating it, but never took a sip. I stared at the wall, at the spot where the camera was, trying to remember when it had appeared. It was the same one that had always been above the refrigerator. Mark said it was a gas leak detector. I never thought to check. Why would I? My husband said so, so it must be true. That's how I'd always lived. He said it, I believed it. He said it, I did it. He said I was too soft, that people would take advantage of me, and I let him take advantage of me in the most elaborate way possible. I walked over to the refrigerator, stood on a stool, and looked the camera in the eye. A tiny black lens embedded in the plastic casing Mark had mounted on the wall. I reached out to rip it off, but stopped at the last second. I couldn't. If I took it down, he'd know I'd seen something. He'd know I knew. And then what? I imagined his face when he discovered the camera was gone. He wouldn't ask directly. He'd start circling, asking strange questions, checking on me, watching me even more closely. Or he'd deny it, tell me I was crazy, that it wasn't a camera, that I was imagining things. And I'd believe him. I knew I'd believe him, because I always believed him, because he could say things in such a way that my doubts became my own stupidity. I stepped off the stool, sat back at the table, and opened the laptop. The tab was still there. I clicked it, and the screen filled again with the image of my kitchen. Now I was watching myself from the outside, a frightened woman in a sweatshirt, hair a mess, sitting at a table in front of a laptop. I waved again. My on-screen self waved back. I clicked the address bar to see the browsing history. The site was called Home Eye. I remembered the name, though it meant nothing to me then. The address was long, a string of numbers and symbols. I copied it into the Notes app on my phone, then closed the laptop, turned off the light, and went to the bedroom. Mark was asleep on his side of the bed, breathing quietly, peacefully. I lay down next to him but didn't move closer. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, feeling all those tiny black eyes watching me from the darkness. I knew there were many of them. I knew they were everywhere, but I didn't know exactly where, and that was the worst part. In the morning, I woke to the sound of the coffee maker. Mark was already in the kitchen. I could hear him clattering cups, opening the refrigerator. I lay there, gathering my strength, feeling the weight in my chest. I had to get up, walk into the kitchen, look him in the eye, and pretend nothing had happened. I got up, washed my face, got dressed, and went out. Mark was sitting at the table with the laptop, that same laptop, drinking coffee. He looked up at me and smiled. "Morning. Coffee?" "Please," I said, sitting across from him. The laptop was open, but all I could see was his work email, messages, spreadsheets, nothing suspicious. The feed tab was closed. "You got home late last night," he said, pouring me a cup. "How's Elena?" "Good. Everything's fine." I watched him move around the kitchen, and I saw the camera above the refrigerator. Mark didn't pay it any attention, no more than he'd pay attention to the kettle or the microwave. To him, it was just a fixture, part of the decor. I picked up my mug, brought it to my lips, but I couldn't drink. My mouth was dry, my tongue felt thick. "Hey," I started, trying to sound casual. "That thing above the refrigerator, it's really a gas detector?" Mark raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "No reason. I was reaching for something on the top shelf yesterday, almost knocked it off, thought I might break it." "You won't," he said calmly. "It's sturdy. And yes, it's a gas detector. Why do you ask?" "Just curious." He looked at me for a few seconds, and there was something new in his expression, attentive, calculating, like he was working through possibilities. Then he chuckled and went back to the laptop. "Laura, you've been asking a lot of questions lately. Is that Elena's influence? Is she getting into your head?"
No, I answered too quickly, just wondering. Good. He closed the laptop and stood up. I've got a meeting. I'll be back this evening. You home today? Yeah, I'll be here. He came over, kissed me on the forehead, the usual familiar gesture, and I felt everything inside me clench. I sat there watching him get dressed in the hallway, zip his jacket, grab his keys. The hallway camera tracked his every move, and mine. When the door closed behind him, I didn't move. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the camera above the refrigerator, waiting. I needed to check. I opened the laptop. Mark was still logged into his email and quickly found that tab in the recent history. It was there. I clicked, and there was my kitchen again, only now I was sitting at the table drinking coffee just as I had been minutes ago. The feed was delayed by a few seconds, but it was live. I slowly raised my hand and gave the camera the middle finger. On the screen, I did the same. I sat there watching myself flip off the camera, and I felt something dark and hot rising inside me. Not fear, not hurt, anger. Pure animal anger, the kind that makes your hands strong and your thoughts clear. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I wasn't going to be silent anymore, and I wasn't going to believe. For the next 3 days, I lived like a spy in my own home. I pretended nothing had changed, that I was still the trusting Laura who asked stupid questions and quickly forgot about them. I smiled at Mark, made dinner, watched TV with him, and at night, when he was asleep, I opened the laptop and studied the site I'd found. HomeEye turned out to be a surveillance platform. The interface was simple. A list of cameras, their status, a button for live feed. I saw that Mark had 6 devices registered, 6 cameras in our apartment. Over those 3 days, I found them all. One in the kitchen, the one I already knew about, one in the hallway, one in the living room disguised as a picture frame, one in the hallway to the bedroom, and 2 I hadn't known about. The first was in the bedroom, inside the wall clock across from the bed. I found it when I was changing the battery. I took the clock down, turned it over, and in the mechanism I saw a tiny black lens embedded in the clock face. My hands shook so badly the clock slipped, the glass cracked. I stood in the middle of the bedroom, clutching the broken clock, staring at the bed. Our bed, where I couldn't finish the thought. The 6th camera was in the bathroom. It was built into the shelf above the sink, aimed directly at the shower. I found it when I was cleaning and my hand accidentally brushed the lower shelf. It shifted slightly and I saw a small lens staring right at me. I froze, kneeling on the floor with a wet rag in my hand, staring into that black eye. The bathroom was cold, but I was burning up. They'd been filming me in the shower, filming me stepping out wrapped in a towel, filming me putting on makeup, brushing my teeth, combing my hair, all those years. I remembered one time, after a fight, sitting on the bathroom floor crying, my face buried in my knees. I was sure I was alone, and that tiny black eye in the shelf was watching me, maybe sending my tears to someone who'd paid for the privilege. Because I had no doubt this wasn't just personal surveillance. If there was a site, if there was a live feed, then there were viewers. I sat down on the bathroom floor, leaned back against the cold wall, and closed my eyes. One thought kept circling in my head. How many people have seen me? Who are they? Where are they? What did they think, watching me live my ordinary, boring life? I felt physically sick. Bile rose in my throat. I clenched my jaw to keep from throwing up. I sat there for maybe an hour. Then I stood up, wiped the floor, put the shelf back in place, and walked out. I had to stay calm. I had to gather evidence. I had to figure out what game Mark was playing before I made my move. Because if I just ripped down all the cameras and started a fight, he'd deny everything. He'd say I was crazy, that they weren't cameras, that I'd imagined it all. And maybe I would have believed him if I hadn't seen the feed with my own eyes. But I had seen it, and now I needed proof he couldn't deny.
I registered for the home I site under a fake name. It was easier than I expected, just an email address, which I set up in 5 minutes. I entered the address I'd copied from Mark's history, and it took me to the camera page. The system asked for a password. I tried our wedding date, no. Mark's birthday, no. My birthday, yes. The password was my birthday. I stared at the screen where 6 camera feeds had opened and felt something inside me finally shatter. He'd used my birthday, mine, like it was all for me, like he was doing it out of love. I clicked the first camera, the kitchen. In the corner of the screen, the current time glowed, along with an icon showing it was recording. I clicked the second, hallway, empty. Third, living room. Fourth, hallway. Fifth, bedroom. Mark was lying on the bed, dozing with his arm under his head. I watched him through the camera he'd installed, watched him sleep. And suddenly I wasn't scared for myself. I was scared that he knew I was watching, that he could feel it even in his sleep. I closed the laptop, left the bathroom, and lay down next to him. He didn't wake up. I lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking that there was no safe place in my home anymore. Every room, every corner was being watched. Even here, in bed with the man who swore he loved me, I was an object. I remembered one time when we first moved in, I undressed in front of him and he said, "You're so beautiful." I blushed, embarrassed, turned away. And now I thought, he wasn't just watching me with his eyes. He was watching me through cameras that would maybe be seen by hundreds of other eyes. I rolled onto my side, my back to Mark, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself cry. Quietly, so he wouldn't hear, but I knew the camera and the clock across from the bed could see my shoulders shaking, and I didn't care.
On the 4th day, I went to Elena's. I couldn't be in that apartment anymore where every glance felt false and every wall felt see-through. Elena met me at the door, took one look at my face, and immediately sat me down in her kitchen, poured me tea, closed the kitchen door even though we were alone. "What happened?" she asked, looking me in the eye. "You look terrible." I sat there, gripping my hot mug, not knowing where to start. I was afraid that if I started talking, I wouldn't be able to stop, or the words would get stuck in my throat and I'd just sit there in silence. "Elena," I began, "there are cameras in my apartment. Everywhere. The kitchen, the bedroom, the bathroom. Mark installed them. I found a live feed on his laptop." Elena froze, the kettle in her hand. Then slowly she set it down on the counter and sat across from me. "Are you sure?" "I saw it with my own eyes. I registered on the site where the feed is. 6 cameras, Elena. 6! Even in the bathroom." Elena went pale. She'd known Mark as long as I had always been wary of him, but I'd always chalked it up to her natural suspicion. "Did you talk to him?" she asked. "No, I'm scared. He'll deny everything. He'll say I'm crazy, that they're not cameras, that I made it all up, and I don't know what to do." "Listen to me." Elena took my hand, her palm dry and warm. "You're not crazy. You found proof. You need to save it. Screenshots, addresses, everything you can. And then go to a lawyer and the police. This is illegal, Laura. This is a crime." "The police?" I felt fear give way to panic. What if they don't believe me? What if Mark finds out? What, he? Elena squeezed my hand tighter. "Would he hit you? Has he hit you? Laura, tell me." "No," I shook my head. "He's never hit me, but he controls everything. He knows where I am, who I'm talking to, what I'm doing. There's a tracking app on my phone. He checks my texts, my calls." Elena let go of my hand and covered her face with her palms. "Oh my God, Laura, how long has this been going on?" "Always," I said quietly. "From the very beginning. I just didn't notice or didn't want to notice. We sat in silence. I looked around Elena's kitchen, cozy with colorful dish towels, a postcard on the refrigerator, flowers on the windowsill. No cameras here. Here I could talk freely. "You have to leave him," Elena said finally, lifting her head. "Pack your things and leave right now. Stay with me." "I can't. He'll find me. He always finds me. We'll go to the police, file a report, ask for protection." "Elena, he has connections everywhere. He knows people. I don't know who. He always says if anything happens, he'll take care of it. He said he has influential friends. I'm scared that if I go to the police, they'll just call him and—" "Laura, look at me." Elena took my face in her hands. "You're strong. You can do this. But if you stay there with him, with those cameras, you'll break. You're already breaking. I can see it." I sat there, feeling her fingers on my cheeks, and I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. There was only emptiness and a heavy, sticky decision forming somewhere deep inside. I couldn't leave. Not yet. Not like this. "I'm not leaving," I said firmly. "First, I need to understand what he's doing. These cameras, this site, it's not just for fun. He's making money from it. I need to find out how many people are watching, whether they're paying, who runs the site. I need to gather evidence. If I just leave, he'll keep doing this. He'll find another woman, put cameras in her home, and it'll start all over." "Laura, you're not a cop. You shouldn't have to do this." "I have to," I said, "because if not me, then who? Who's going to stop him? No one. He'll keep doing it forever. And I want him to pay for everything." Elena looked at me for a long time, then sighed and nodded. "Okay, but you're going to be smart about this. You're going to save everything you find. You're going to come to me every day and tell me what you've learned. And if I think you're in danger, I will drag you out of there myself. Deal?" "Deal." I went home that evening. Mark was in the living room watching TV, drinking a beer. He looked up when I came in and smiled. "How's Elena?" "Good. She says hi." "She always says hi," he snorted. "She's weird. You spend too much time with her." "She's my friend." "I know, but she's a bad influence. You've been jumpy lately." I walked to the kitchen and put the kettle on. The camera above the refrigerator watched me. I could feel its gaze on the back of my neck. "I'm not jumpy," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Just tired from work." "Maybe you should take some time off," Mark suggested, appearing in the kitchen doorway. "Go somewhere. You've always wanted to see the mountains." "Maybe," I said without turning around. "I'll think about it." I stood at the stove making tea, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a hunter. I looked at the camera, and in my head, a plan was already forming. I would learn everything. I would find all the evidence. I would make him regret the day he decided I could be managed like an object. The next 2 weeks, I gathered information. Every day when Mark went to work or to meetings, I opened his laptop and dug through files, browser history, messages. I found a folder on his desktop labeled Archive 2023, and when I opened it, my heart stopped. Inside were hundreds of video files, each with a date and time. I opened the first one. It was me, sitting in the kitchen eating breakfast. I watched myself butter toast, drink coffee, talk to myself. It was disgusting and mesmerizing at the same time. I scrolled through several files. I was everywhere. In the kitchen, in the living room, in the bedroom, in the bathroom. In some recordings I was dressed, in others I wasn't. I sat there watching myself naked, stepping out of the shower, and I felt the ground fall away beneath me. I found files dated a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years. He'd been recording me the whole time, from the moment we moved in, maybe before. I closed that folder and opened another, Clients. Inside were folders with names I didn't recognize. I opened one. Inside were links to feeds, login details, passwords, and dollar amounts. I understood. He was selling access to the cameras. People paid him to watch me, my life. My husband was selling my intimate life, my morning routines, my tears, my laughter, my body. All of it was merchandise. I sat gripping the edge of the table, staring at the numbers, amounts from $50 to $500 per month for access to my bedroom. I remembered Mark talking about good investments, how we bought the new apartment, how happy he was when I agreed to another camera for safety. I was his investment, his business, his product. That night, I couldn't look at him. I sat at dinner pushing food around my plate, staring at the tablecloth. Mark was talking about work, new contracts. I nodded but didn't hear a word. In front of my eyes were dollar amounts and my own naked body on the laptop screen. "Laura, are you listening to me?" he asked, frowning. "Yeah, sorry, I zoned out." "About what?" "Work, long day." He looked at me closely and I felt him scanning my face, looking for signs of deception. I smiled the way I always smiled, soft, trusting, a little shy. "You work too hard," he said, softening. "Maybe you should quit. I told you I can support us." "I'll think about it," I said, and for the first time, those words weren't just an excuse. I was thinking about how I was going to come out of this the winner, how I was going to take away everything he'd built on my humiliation. In the third week, I found a lawyer. She was recommended by Elena, a colleague who specialized in domestic abuse and privacy crimes. Her name was Diane Harlow. She was short, gray-haired, with sharp eyes and strong hands. I went to her office, leaving my phone in the car. "Tell me everything," she said, opening a notebook. I told her everything. The cameras, the site, the clients folder, the videos, the money. I put a flash drive on her desk with copies of the files, screenshots, addresses. Diane listened without interrupting, taking notes. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and looked at me. "This is serious," she said. "California Penal Code 647J, invasion of privacy, unauthorized recording, and distribution since he was selling access. If we can prove the commercial aspect, that's a felony. He's looking at real time." "What do I do?" I asked. "First, preserve all the evidence properly. We'll need notarized copies of the screenshots, a forensic expert to verify the video files. Then we file a police report. But," she raised a finger, "there's a catch. If you file now, he'll find out. His lawyers will drag it out and he'll destroy the evidence." "I know," I nodded. "That's why I don't want to go to the police until I'm sure he can't delete anything." "What do you propose?" "I want to expose him publicly so he can't deny it, so there are witnesses. The police can come after." Diane looked at me for a long time, then slowly nodded. "That's risky, but I understand wanting to reclaim your power. In cases like this, it's not just about punishment, it's about justice. I'll help you, but you need to be prepared for him to be dangerous when he realizes he's losing control." "I'm ready," I said. "I'm not afraid of him anymore." I wasn't being completely honest. I was afraid. Every day coming home, I felt a knot of fear in my chest. I was afraid he'd notice the change in me, read my thoughts on my face, that one day I'd snap and scream, rip the cameras out of the walls, smash the laptop, claw at his face. But I held on. I kept playing my part, the loving, trusting, slightly oblivious wife who never asked too many questions. I even became more affectionate, more compliant. Mark noticed. "You've changed," he said one night as we sat on the couch watching a movie. "Softer. I like it." "I just realized how much you do for me," I said, leaning into him, "and how little I appreciate you." He put his arm around me, kissed the top of my head, and I felt his hand on my shoulder, heavy, sure. I imagined that same hand mounting cameras in the bathroom, in the bedroom, typing in the password, my birthday, to give strangers access to my life. I smiled and moved closer. My plan came together. I decided I would reveal everything at a family dinner. I'd invite my parents, Elena, Mark's mother, everyone who'd witnessed our perfect marriage. I wanted them to see his face when the mask fell. I wanted him to be unable to deny it in front of them, in front of everyone who knew him as a devoted husband and an upstanding man. I prepared everything, copied all the files, took screenshots, printed the statements from the site showing the payments he'd received from clients. I bought a new laptop, kept it at Elena so Mark couldn't find the copies. I arranged with Diane that she'd wait for my call, and the moment I gave the word, she'd file the police report with all the evidence. I invited the guests for Saturday, telling Mark I wanted to have a dinner to celebrate his recent promotion. He was pleased, said I was a good wife, that he always knew I'd come around. He didn't suspect a thing. Why would he? His obedient, convenient wife who never doubted anything, suddenly throwing a party in his honor. Everything was going according to plan.
Saturday came faster than I expected. I cooked all day, roasted meat, made salads, set the table. The cameras recorded my every move. I knew Mark might be watching from his office, watching me move around the kitchen, adjust the tablecloth, nervously rearrange plates. I smiled at the camera above the refrigerator and thought, watch, you're about to see the best show of your life. The guests started arriving at 7. Elena came first. She was nervous but steady. Then Mark's parents, his mother, Patricia, a tall, brittle woman with a perpetually dissatisfied face, and his father, Richard, a quiet man who'd retreated into himself years ago. My parents arrived a little later, my mother always fussing with a pie, and my father, who immediately went to the living room and turned on the TV. Mark was in his element, smiling, joking, pouring wine. He put his arm around my waist, kissed my cheek, called me his girl. I smiled back, and inside I was seething. Over dinner, we talked about nothing, the weather, the news, everyone's health. Mark talked about his success at work, how much he'd done for our family, how we'd finally buy a house in the country, how he'd make sure I wanted for nothing. I listened, nodded, poured wine. When everyone had eaten and the conversation was winding down, I stood up. "Everyone," I said, feeling all eyes turn to me, "I'd like to make a toast to Mark." Mark smiled, raised his glass. But first, I walked over to the sideboard where I'd left a laptop. "I want to show you something." I opened the laptop, connected it to the TV we'd bought years ago for movie nights. The Home Eye login page appeared on the screen. "Lara, what is this?" Mark asked, and for the first time that evening there was tension in his voice. "You'll see," I said, typing in the password. "I found this in your laptop 3 weeks ago. You forgot to close the tab when I came home from Elena's." I opened the camera list, 6 icons, 6 black squares, each showing a feed from our apartment. The kitchen where we'd just eaten, the living room where the guests were sitting, the hallway, the bedroom, the bathroom. I zoomed in on the kitchen feed. On the screen, we were all sitting at the table, my mom adjusting her napkin, Mark frozen with his glass in the air. "This is our kitchen," I said evenly. The camera above the refrigerator that Mark installed as a gas detector. "And here's the living room, the camera inside the picture frame. The bedroom, the camera in the wall clock across from the bed. And the bathroom, the camera in the shelf above the sink." I switched between feeds, showing each room. The table went silent, the kind of silence where you can hear someone's life falling apart. Mark sat with his jaw clenched so tight the muscles stood out. His mother stared at the screen, mouth open. My mother had gone pale, her hands pressed to her chest. "I didn't know about these cameras," I continued. "Mark told me they were safety sensors. I believed him. I always believed him, but 3 weeks ago I found this in his laptop." I opened the clients folder. Names, dollar amounts, feed links appeared on the screen. "He was selling access to these cameras," I said, and my voice didn't waver. "Strangers paid money to watch me sleep, shower, get dressed, watch me cry when I thought no one was watching.
I was a product, and I was his business. Laura, Mark stood up, his face white, eyes blazing. What are you saying? Are you sick? Are you hallucinating? Don't, I said quietly. Don't play that game. I have everything. Screenshots, videos, statements. I've been gathering evidence for 3 weeks, and this morning I gave it all to my lawyer. The police report goes in tomorrow. Mark took a step toward me, but Elena moved between us. He stopped, fists clenched. You've been pretending this whole time? I've been learning, I said, looking him straight in the eye. Learning to be what you wanted me to be. Convenient, trusting, stupid. But I'm not stupid, Mark. I just loved you, and you used my love to sell me like a thing. That's not true, his voice cracked. You're lying. Those aren't my cameras. You installed them yourself to set me up. Mark, his father said quietly. Richard, who'd been silent the whole night. Sit down. Dad, Sit down. Mark sat. He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw not remorse, not shame. I saw rage. The rage of a man who'd lost control and didn't know how to get it back. Laura, my mother said, her voice trembling. Honey, is this true? It's true, Mom. I went to her, took her hand. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I was afraid of what he'd do if he found out. What are you? Patricia stood up, her face twisted. What are you doing to my son? He's a devoted husband. He provided for you. He filmed me in the shower, Patricia, I said, turning to her. He sold videos of me sleeping, getting dressed. Do you want me to show you? I have every single one. Patricia sat back down, lips pressed together. Her face showed disgust, but I couldn't tell if it was for me or for her son. You made this all up, Mark hissed. You want to destroy me. Why? I gave you everything. The apartment, the money, a life you could only dream of. You gave me an illusion, I said, walking toward him, and you took something much more than an apartment or money. You took my sense of safety. You took my belief that I could be safe in my own home. You made me an exhibit in your collection, and I will never forgive you for that. I turned off the projector, closed the laptop, and faced the guests. Thank you for coming. I'm sorry dinner didn't turn out the way we planned. I think Mark and I need some time alone.
The guests began to rise. My parents looked lost, my mother crying, my father silently putting on his jacket. Elena came to me, hugged me. You okay? She whispered. I'm fine, I said. It's okay. You're not staying with him, she said, a statement, not a question. No, I'll pack some things and come to yours. I'll be waiting. She left. Patricia and Richard left without saying goodbye. My parents left last. My mother tried to say something, but my father led her out, throwing me a quick, worried glance. I was alone in the kitchen, with Mark. He sat at the table, gripping his wine glass, staring at nothing. I sat across from him. You destroyed me, he said quietly. Do you understand? My business, my reputation, my family, everything I built. You built it on me, I said, on my body, my life. You chose that business. Now you get to live with the consequences. You think the police will do anything? He laughed, and there was something pathetic, childish in it. I have connections everywhere. I'll get off. We'll see, I said. My lawyer is Diane Harlow. She specializes in cases like this, and she has all the evidence, every bit of it. You can't bury this, Mark. Too many witnesses, too much proof. He looked up at me. There was no hatred in his eyes. Something else. Fear. Genuine animal fear. The kind that comes when you realize it's all over. Laura, he said, and his voice had gone soft, persuasive, the way it got when he wanted something from me. Laura, let's talk. Maybe we can make a deal. I'll delete everything, all the cameras. I'll pay you, whatever you want. You'll pay me? I laughed. Like your clients? No, Mark, we'll make our deal in court.
You want to send me to prison? I want you to answer for what you did, and I want other women to know who you are." He stood up, knocking over his chair, his face contorted. He stepped toward me, and for the first time, I was genuinely afraid. I jumped up, backed toward the wall, looking for something to defend myself with, but he stopped. He looked at the camera above the refrigerator, then back at me. "You're right," he said, suddenly calm. "I did it, and I don't regret it. You were the most profitable product I ever had. People paid good money to watch you. You have no idea how much you were worth." Those words hit me harder than if he'd raised a hand to me. I stood with my back against the wall, staring at the man I'd been married to for 8 years, and I saw not my husband. I saw a stranger, cold and calculating, who had just dropped the mask. "Get out," I said quietly. "Get out of my house." "It's my house," he sneered. "This apartment was bought with my money, Mark. I transferred you my savings when we moved in. I thought we were a team, but I'll check, and if I'm right, you're leaving with nothing." He stared at me, and slowly the light went out of his eyes. He understood. The game was over. He turned, walked out of the kitchen, and a moment later I heard the front door slam. I was alone. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, looking at the camera above the refrigerator, feeling tears run down my cheeks. But they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of release. I walked slowly to the refrigerator, climbed onto a stool, and ripped the camera off the wall. The wires gave a pathetic little shriek. Plastic cracked. I crushed it in my fist, feeling sharp edges dig into my palm. Then I went to the living room and tore the camera out of the picture frame. The hallway, another. In the bedroom, I took down the clock, pulled the camera from its mechanism, and smashed it with my heel. In the bathroom, I ripped the shelf off the wall, found the camera, threw it in the toilet, and flushed. I moved through the apartment like a woman possessed, tearing every black eye from every wall. When it was over, I sat down in the hallway surrounded by shattered plastic and wires and cried. Cried with relief, with rage, with loss, with all of it at once. I cried like I'd never cried, sobbing, choking, face buried in my knees, and I didn't care if the camera saw me. They were gone.
A year passed. A lot changed. Mark was arrested 2 days after that dinner. Diane filed the report, and the police came with a search warrant. They took all the electronics, found the video folders, the client communications, the bank statements. The case was bigger than just Mark. HomeEye turned out to be part of a network where people posted feeds from private homes, filming partners, relatives, neighbors without their knowledge. More than 20 people were involved, and Mark was one of the organizers. He got 4 years in state prison. The apartment stayed with me. The court ruled it had been bought with my money since I'd transferred him my savings and he hadn't contributed a cent. I sold it 6 months later. I couldn't live there. Every wall, every room reminded me that I'd never been alone. I bought a small studio on the other side of the city. No cameras, no smart speakers, just me, my books, my plants on the windowsill. It took me a long time to get used to the silence. In the apartment with Mark, something was always humming, beeping, voice activated, LED lights blinking. Here, it was quiet. At first, the silence scared me. I thought it wasn't silence at all, but something waiting, watching. I checked the walls, the outlets, the light fixtures, looking for black eyes that weren't there. Eventually, I got used to it. The silence became mine. It became freedom. I stopped checking my phone, stopped being afraid someone might read my messages. I stopped locking the bathroom door when I showered. I could leave it open if I wanted, and no one was watching. I learned to be alone again. Not lonely, alone. They're different things. Sometimes I think about that night when I found the feed. I think about sitting in the kitchen, clutching my cold mug of tea, watching myself from the outside. Back then, I thought my life was over, that I'd never recover from the betrayal. But I was wrong. I didn't just recover, I became stronger. I stopped being a victim. I stopped being what he made me. I became myself, someone who isn't afraid to ask questions, who doesn't make excuses for people who hurt her, who knows that silence in a house can be not a threat, but a sanctuary. I finished my coffee this morning, sitting on the windowsill of my new apartment, and I looked at the clock on my nightstand. Simple, mechanical, no cameras, no wires. It ticked evenly, calmly. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe deeply, that I was free, that no one could see me unless I wanted to be seen. And that was worth more than any apartment, any money, any business he built on my life. I set the mug on the windowsill, and sunlight caught its edge, splintering into 1,000 tiny reflections. I ran my finger along the smooth surface, and I thought I could feel warmth. Not burning, just warmth. The silence in my house doesn't scare me anymore. It's mine, and it's priceless.